International humanitarian law not à la carte menu, can't be applied selectively, UN.
This post received a score of 3,700, with an upvote ratio of 89%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
Unless you're on the Security Council, then there's suggestions.
Which is kinda the point of having nukes and being on the Security Council. Also the reason the UN is structured as it is. It's largely toothless, so countries are better off by participating than by not participating. Even Israel does this. They said they'd deny UN staff entry after the shitshow last week and then they let them in anyway.
I have a feeling there was a hush-hush meeting with the US where Israel was effectively told they didn't have a choice.
I mean, it's a global PR negative for the US. Even elements of the EU do not like this, even after getting blasted by the massacre carried by Hamas. International law and humanitarian crimes have always been about who you know and what you have, to defend yourself, to offer, to sell, etc. Ethics and morality have no input. This is what everyone in their hearts knows. The rules are very different when the cameras are watching. We all know barely anything about the civil war Ethiopia just had. Maybe is still having. Fuck if I know, the cameras aren't rolling.
There is two reasons Israel, Palestine and Ukraine, Russia are such insanely online and televised wars. 1. In both cases one of the countries involved has a pretty high freedom of the press, and while you can argue about the slants and takes of journalism from those countries, they also freely allow journalists from other countries into their own. 2. In both cases there are relatively safe, if not outright safe, areas near the front lines for these journalists to work from. Israel is really good at defending itself against missile strikes, so journalists can be in the country and pretty safe. In Ukraine, while at first not as accessible, now has a relatively safe Kyiv near the front lines to be reported from.
So far 34 journalists have been killed in the Israeli-Hamas war.
Relatively safe for a war zone does not mean safe. However, these agencies feel much more capable of sending people to Israel and Ukraine than to Myanmar or Sudan, etc.
Is it even worth me checking whether he called for a ceasefire against ISIS, or even whether he's calling for a ceasefire in Syria?
Or any of those times Russia bombed Ukraine during a ceasefire? I can't name a single ceasefire in my lifetime that was actually honored, with the exception of maybe the Taliban not firing on the US while the US was evacuating from Afghanistan, and even then that's farcical because they absolutely would have if they weren't so high on opium that they couldn't function.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by smmry.com, without any human intervention.